it's very common to hear many Christians say that this issue of Palestine Israel is too complicated, it's too far away, it's too political, and let's keep out of it. But I would say, if that's the case, I think we have a very distorted view of God and a very diminished view of Christ himself. If we say that Christ is Lord over life, then Christ is Lord over every aspect of our lives, including political realities, including what's happening in Palestine, Israel. So, does our Christianity speak to our economics, our social issues, our finances, our interpersonal relations? If it does, that's wonderful. So why doesn't it speak into your politics? Why is that the exception to the rule? This might be an American issue because of the separation between state and church. I get it. But I think it's also a theological issue. Is Christ relevant? Is he Lord or not? At the same time, I don't think it's a political issue. If politics is a bad word for you, if you're not politically engaged, paying attention to the suffering of people is a basic humanitarian issue. It doesn't even have to be a faith issue. It's a basic, decent issue of humanity, of advocating for the rights of people, for them to live in dignity and to flourish and to have a better life. And that's at the foundations of our faith, whether from Christ saying, I have come to give you life and a life more abundant, whether him in Luke 4 and in Matthew 24 declaring that he came to set the captive free. In Matthew 24, that he identified with the naked and the imprisoned and the hungry. So do we identify with those people as well? Do we want to set the prisoner free? I think a lot of this also comes from a very, problematic theological position by many Christians, especially evangelicals, that they assume that Christianity is all about my pietistic practices, going to church, praying, reading the Bible, and it's all about kind of this spiritual practice, and it's all about going to heaven and ignoring my neighbor. And I would say that is just not loving. Even if we put aside the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, which we shouldn't, but if you look at the ministry of Jesus, look at the Sermon on the Mount, I think it's very clear where Christ put himself, and also very clear what Christ demands of us. Look at the Beatitudes, centering the meek and those who are thirsty for and hungry for righteousness, and those who are merciful, and those who are powerless, and so on and so forth. So the ministry of Christ is centered alongside or centered on the marginalized in society, the Samaritan, the woman, the naked, the poor. And so I think that's a basic humanitarian issue, but also a theological issue. So I don't think there's an escape, and I think it's a huge problem that Christians try to divest themselves from this issue, especially because two things: the church is very political. If you look at especially now in the election season, Christians are very comfortable engaging in politics, in American domestic politics at least. And secondly, and more crucially, I think, it's because of the oversized role that the American church plays in what's happening in Palestine and Israel, in the oversized role of the American government to whom we pay our taxes, in causing harm and suffering and death to the Palestinians, for example, right now in Gaza. So you cannot escape it. Like this is part of our identity as Christians, bottom line, basic identity. But also, if you live in the US, I think this is a very essential issue for you as a citizen, that it is your tax dollars are contributing to the suffering of the Palestinians. So you have to do it from a humanitarian perspective. As a Christian, I think it's very clear to me where the Christian should stand, but also as a political citizen, as a human who functions in space and time, and who's influenced and is engaging with politics and political life all the time, who pays taxes and who votes and so on, that you need to hold also your officials accountable by engaging politically and by advocating for justice and for peace. So I don't think we have an escape. I think the mandate is clear for us, especially if you're in the U.S., especially if you're part of this country. Then you have an oversized responsibility to speak, to pray first, but also to speak and also to act. I think this is essential, especially in this moment in time, especially with what's happening in Palestine today.